All right, we're going to call the meeting to order. We will start with an opening prayer by Art Gentry. I've just closed the door, but that doesn't mean you have to stop getting food. Feel free anytime to get up and go out and get your food. You can eat throughout the whole meeting. That would be just fine with us. Take it away, Art.
Heavenly Father, we pray this day in thanksgiving for all you have given to us. We pray that your wisdom and guidance enter as a gift to all who lead us in these troubling times. We pray, Father, that more people will come to know your true message of love and mercy, and that your peace and love will prevail in all people, including the evil of abortion and euthanasia. Our Lord said, "Whatsoever you do to the least of mine, that you do unto me." Therefore, Father, may all that we do, for your gift of life to each of us, be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
Amen. It is traditional, yes? Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, I should have done that first. I'll do it myself. Yeah, I don't even have to ask them to do it. I'm learning. Okay, there you go. Yeah, the background music was intended for the prayer, right? No. Okay. It is traditional for the Kansas Republican Assembly to have our flag salute led by the oldest veteran present. I see some old veterans around here. If you're older than 65 and a veteran, show me your hand. Oh boy, look at this. 1, 2, holy cow, look at, keep them up. Look at this. Let's give these guys a round of applause. Look at that. Look at that. Okay, so if you're a veteran and over 75, let's leave them up in the air. Look at that, still have 2. All right, so older than 79. Oh my gosh. Older than 82. Okay, Jim, you got it. You got it. Jim is going to lead us in a flag salute, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. The flag, we got one right here or the one behind. Either one. You can pledge to either one. They're quite the same. Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Jim. Okay, you should have a song sheet. I think everybody's got one but me. Let's see here. And I should be able to do it without here. I'll tell you what, I see an extra one here. I'm going to steal one from you. We're going to sing My Country 'Tis of Thee. And we have a competition here between the guys and the gals. And the guys should sing the blue, and the gals will sing the red. And if you want to help a little bit on the ladies' voices, but actually there's enough ladies in here, I think they might even outdo us. My country 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. All right, that's for everybody to sing. Okay, we have a meeting that has been long awaited. Obviously, everybody here is probably a radio listener. Oh, let me introduce a few people first. We have the former mayor of Cheney, Kansas, Carl Koster here. We have, obviously, at the head table, we have Senator Dan Kerschen, Senator Ty Masterson, and Representative Les Osterman. And then over here in the blue and the vest, we have, why am I drawing a blank? Don't tell me. Don't even tell me. Andy Hoosier, spelled without an I. H-O-O-S-E-R. Leave that I out of there. Okay. Did I get it right, Andy?
That's right.
And if you listen to the Voice of Reason in the morning, between about 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock, is that about right? And if you're not listening to that, I really recommend that you do. He's won me over. When Joseph Ashby left, I said, oh, doggone it, nobody can replace Joseph Ashby. Well, this guy did, and he's doing a great job, and even Joseph Ashby thinks he's doing a great job. So I really thank you, Andy, and I understand I wasn't able to listen much this morning, but I understand that you made an announcement, a request of letting people know that we were having the meeting. So I thank you for that very much. I really appreciate it. Okay, so tonight we're going to have by the way, Debbie Baker, the secretary, is coming in. She can't come till 7:30. So do I have a volunteer timekeeper? Is there somebody with a timer or watch? I don't really think we're going to probably need it. Art, if you don't mind, I'm going to press you into service again. If you kind of watch the time, we'll have, I want a 3-minute introduction of who these people are. I don't want you to talk about taxes at the moment. I don't want you to talk about the veto override. I just want you to tell us about who you are, and I think that, we're probably not all going to get along before the night's over. But people get along with each other better if they know a little bit about each other, and then we can talk about ideas after that, and we'll take it from there. So Dan, I'm going to have you go first. Just tell us who you are, and all I know about Dan is that he used to be a dairy farmer, or maybe still is. I'm not sure if you're still doing the dairy farming thing, but he was a friend of Bud Henson. How many of you remember Bud Henson? Let me see your hand. Oh, look at that. Everything's changing. Bud Henson used to be a pillar of the Republican Party, and he's a good friend of his. And Dan is a senator now from West Wichita, and very pleased to have him here tonight. And he is brave enough to come and stand up for his vote, which is probably not the vote that would be given from this group. But so he's here alone. By the way, let me tell you real quickly, on your agenda, you see that we had Susan Concanon from a long distance away. It just happened that she had to travel to Wichita tomorrow and is coming here tonight, going to stay overnight. And she might show up in the middle of the meeting and she may not. But she was willing to do it if she could have arranged it. She had lots of things going on. I will also mention this. We had a lot of representatives that, not a lot, we had several, about 6 of them to be exact, that came up with excuses that I thought were a little bit less than real genuine. Had one that was coming down with a summer cold. I get it, I get it, but Dan is brave enough to be here, okay? He didn't call and say, hey, I might be coming down with a summer cold. And then we have, people that say, well, I'm going to be traveling. That's always an excuse. But you know what I'm saying? I don't want to say that they're being disingenuous, but there was excuses that I thought were pretty light. So again, thank you, Dan, for being here. If you'll tell us about yourself for 3 minutes, and then Ty will do the same thing, and Les will do the same again, and then we'll get into the meat of the meeting.
All right. Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you for the invitation and for dinner too. I appreciate that very much.
Yes, it's on me.
And when Mark called me on Tuesday, I told him I had a meeting in Manhattan all day today. The Ag Summit was going on, the governor's conference there, and I didn't go to that because unfortunately we had a soybean worm infestation came in yesterday. We noticed it, so we had to start spraying right away, and we had some field work to do. Matter of fact, this is the first time I ate dinner at a table for the whole week. Generally, it's in a tractor or in a truck. So we had a dairy for 45 years. In 2008, we sold it, and then we still farm out there, Garden Plain, wheat, milo, dryland corn, and soybeans. So still active farmer. My son is full-time in the operation with us. I have 2 brothers also in the farm. And we live just across the road on the farm there. So I've been there my whole life, and went to college at K-State, graduated from there, and major in agriculture. I've been in most of the farm organizations, Farm Bureau, DHIA, all of those, KLA, all of those organizations. Really got involved with those and really want to speak out on behalf of the true minority in agriculture nowadays. So it was very rewarding, and I ended up in 2009 running for the House, and here I am in the Senate now, so that's enough.
Very good, thank you. Go ahead, Ty.
I'm Ty Masterson, and I shall start since like 3 minutes will be more than enough. I also want to thank Dan for coming, because it is tough to go in an environment where most people are going to disagree, and I would just say that I consider Dan a friend and someone that you can talk to about anything. We obviously disagree pretty vehemently on this particular issue that we're gonna be discussing, but outside of that, I mean, things like life, I mean, there's areas where we do agree, so, and he's easy to talk to. My first hat, I wear many hats, but my first hat is husband and father. I have 6 children, I have 1 grandchild. I have my mother-in-law lives with me, so that's fun. So it's a busy rocking house, but that's what we do. I have my own business. We're blue collar. We install product handling things, overhead cranes, things like that. I also work for WSU in their innovation campus as well as the hat of senator. This year was challenging. We had some good things happen. We started the Truth Caucus, which was a group of members of the legislature, both House and Senate, and got up to about 40 in the middle of the heat of it, members, which is almost fourth of the legislature. And we weren't trying to say we were the purveyors of all truth. We wanted to get out an alternative perspective that you just generally don't hear. You can't watch the evening news and read the Wichita Eagle and actually have an understanding of what's going on in Topeka. So we were trying to penetrate that. We had some good success inside up there with our members, trying to expand that effort and try to penetrate the outside next year.
I'm Les Osterman. I'm a retiree, also a member of the Truth Caucus. And we did have some enjoyable times. I got elected into the House 2010. I served some time in the House with Dan, and it is a pleasure to see Dan here. And just like Ty, Dan and I see a lot together on a lot of things, but this one issue probably not. I mean, that happens up there. But, you know, I've enjoyed myself up there in the House. It's been an enjoyment to work. I think the best thing that ever happened is the Truth Caucus, because that's the time that we actually got the senators and the House of Representatives to actually start joining together and working together for a cause. And I think you're gonna see some more action from us this coming session. With that, we're ready for Mark and whatever he
All
wants
right,
to do.
we're having a little camera trouble back here. We'd like to get this one on tape where our minutes are being taken by video rather than with Debbie, so. Okay, sorry about that interruption. We definitely want to get this on tape if we can. Hold your feet to the fire. No. Okay, so now I would like another 3 to 5 minute talk from each of you. And during this 3 to 5 minute talk, we'll start with Les at the end and go the other direction. During this time, I would like for you to explain 2 things. One, explain your vote on the tax increase. And then secondly, explain your vote on the veto override. And Les, we're going to start with you and come this way.
I voted no on both.
And why?
And the reason I did that is, the first one, on the tax to begin with, I knew that it was gonna be retroactive. And even since the vote's taken place, there's reps out there today telling people, no, it ain't retroactive. Well, if you read the first sentence of that bill, it says, this will take place 1 January 2017. That's retroactive, folks, any way you look at it. And I live in, my district is retirees and low-income people. The first level of that is hitting in. These people they don't make enough money at times to put food on the table. They have to make decisions whether food, medicine, or whatever. And now we're gonna put tax on top of that. And I really felt that was not a smart move, not with our lower income people. And then when the governor vetoed, I stood right with the governor. Again, the low income people, the retirees. I just didn't feel that should be put on their backs. They're having enough trouble as it is. And it's time you have to have somebody that stands up there and fights for the lower income and our retirees, and that's what I was doing.
All right.
Well, clearly, I voted no on both as well. Actually, asked to change my vote from no to heck no, if they could do that in the journal, because it was just, for me, the primary factor, of course, was the retroactivity of it all. I was against the tax increase just from the very beginning, but even if it was technically constitutional and technically legal, it seemed wholly unethical to put somebody under a law 6 months ago and change things midstream, no matter where you were at. And that was, and I know they tried to do some things to, they kind of layered the rates in to try to hide the effect that it was retroactive, but it was still retroactive. And it wasn't just, I felt that it was even deceptive to the public, because it wasn't, the sales pitch to the public was these businesses, right? The small business was the owner was gonna pay his fair share, but it was predominantly a wage tax increase. I mean, it was a 24% on wages. We tried to tell somebody we're giving them a raise over here, but we're taking it out of the backside over here. And on top of that, it was wholly unnecessary. That was the other sales pitch. It had to be done. There was no other alternative. And we had proven, before the chairmanship was taken, I had the budget side, so I was very aware of the budget. We created, with the Truth Caucus, the Republican budget, balanced budget solution, which was an alternative budget. And it wasn't even that aggressive. It was no new spending, still paid the Medicaid and caseloads that are part of just the growth of the system. And it made those payments. It made the CAPERS payments. And they tried to tell people it was all about, we still didn't, this underlying budget still didn't make the CAPERS payments, still took money in transportation, raised the taxes $1.2 billion, and we still showed red in 24 months. It just seemed to me so egregious, I couldn't understand a vote for it. But the culture up there was clearly against, and that's why I voted.
Go ahead, Dan.
All right, let's start with when January rolls around, first thing we have to do is approve the governor's budget. And we do one of our own, and he had done a budget for the coming fiscal year, and we knew there was going to be a rescission bill attached to it because he didn't have enough money to pay for it. Well, we looked at the governor's budget, what he said, what he was going to balance the budget on, because he had to have a balanced budget. And well, he did took money from CAPERS again as usual, and he took all the money from the Pooled Money Investment Board, $360 million, to fill in the gaps. He delayed payments on CAPERS for 3 years. We're not going to make CAPERS payments for 3 years. That puts us right at $480, $500 million behind 3 years from now. And I don't know how you make that up. And then also in the next year, he was going to sell his tobacco securities. All that money, cash that in for 25 cents on the dollar. That raises $60 million a year for Children's Initiative program type stuff. And every year we got $50 to $60 million, and it went to those types of programs, parents as teachers and that kind of stuff. Well, we're going to just cash that all in, take a lump sum to balance our budget. Well, what do you do 2 years from now when that's gone? Everything was gone. And then besides that, in his budget, he had $47 million we had to add at the end because he had put in a savings from Alvarez and Marcel, that efficiency study we did to help us save money, and that was a good thing we did that. But if he figured if we instituted a new health care plan for all the school districts, it would save $47 million. So he put that in the budget as a savings, and guess what? It didn't happen. So at the end of the year, we got to come up with $47 million. That was bogus money to start with. You got a budget ram-packed with all things like that underwater that has no future to it. And so we decided, you got to do something. And like they said too, there's more than 3 of us. There's 165 people up there. And everybody's got an idea. We have to try to find what will work, how much tax you can live with, and how much because there was a consensus to repeal the whole tax plan. I mean, there were some votes for that. And I was on the vice chair of the tax committee in the conference. We offered that to the House. Do you want to go that far? And they were intimidated. They was willing to do that, but they didn't in the end, and we was glad because that takes that off the table. So we know we're not going to have that big of a tax increase. So then we had a flat tax, a 4.6 rate that got nowhere. We put a lot of time in. That's people wanted a fair tax, a flat tax at 4.6, one rate. How's that for the poor people and the low income wages? 4.6. They're at 3 now. So I didn't think that was helping the poor people out very much. So that plan didn't go anywhere. We had 5 or 6 different plans we looked at, and we passed a tax plan in February already. Early on in February, we lost the override. So we knew he was close. We had an idea what people were going to vote for, what we were going to get votes for. And it took us clear till June to get the final product. And it was unfortunate it took that long. We'd had that tax plan done. We could have went straight to school finance because that's the big issue in the State House this year. How are you going to pay for that school finance fund? We had to write the whole thing over. And I thought we did a great job of doing that. The majority leader helped write that, and the folks in the House put together a plan that was bipartisan, had passed with more than enough votes, went through conference, presented, now the court's got it, and they're not even looking at it hardly. So that was, there you're under a court order that you're going to have to raise more money. And there's no way around it, because we, in the Ways and Means Committee, the first end of January, we passed out a Ways and Means a 5% cut to K through 12. Every unanimously vote. And in 24 hours, we lost the vote because, well, the governor weighed in at the last minute and says, if you cut K through 12, I'm going to veto that. So all of a sudden, everything's off the table. You start over. And we're trying to get, 21 votes in the Senate. And now in the override, we got to get 27. So, and when you get that many votes, I think that says something right there, that there's a bunch of people wanting to have a consensus to do something to right our fiscal ship, because you can't be borrowing from borrowing from KDOT. And the budget we have is we're intended, if the growth is there, we can not borrow money from KDOT, and then make our CAPERS payments, because that's what needs to be done. And last year, the governor cut Medicaid 4%, first time ever, to help balance our budget. And that ripple effect went to nursing homes in my district, and all of a sudden their money was short. And so we reinstated that money, paid that back with this new tax plan. So, I mean, there's a lot of things I didn't like, but there's some things we had to do. And in the end, we had consensus to do it. And I felt better about this tax plan than the crappy ones we did the last 2 years, adding sales tax and those kinds of things. And besides that, this tax plan has property tax reduction in it, business loss, and those kinds of things that people want. I got it.
All right, well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate your explanation. And we're going to go ahead and start the question and answer period now. And if you don't mind, I'm going to lead off with a question. I don't normally do that, but just to set the tone here, I'm going to go ahead and start with Ty, and then we'll go. We'll continue going clockwise, but we'll start with a different person each time. So Ty, you get to start on this one. I just would like you to address the basic issue that puzzled me from the start, and that is you have government spending and you have government income. And why did we just focus on taxes and not focus on cutting spending? That is my question here. I understand, and I agree with Dan that you have to make the books have to balance. You have to do your books right. You have to end up with a not a deficit and hopefully not a big surplus, but why not look at the spending side? Why wasn't that taken care of? So I'll let you start, Ty.
Well, I think the short answer to that is because the majority of those up there didn't want to look at the spending side. They wanted to actually go the other direction and spend more. And there was a lot to unpack there in those remarks that'll show the disconnect we have, because we talked about how the governor wanted to do PMIB, and the governor was delaying CAPERS, and the governor was stealing from KDOT. Well, do you know what the budget we all passed did? It took the money from transportation, it delayed CAPERS payments, it took the PMIB money, it did all those things that we just said we didn't want to do, and did them in conjunction with a massive tax increase. So all those things that we say why we didn't, we still did them. And the savings, like the Alvarez and Marsal savings, yeah, he put in an estimated savings that was exposed in Marsal. We actually had a post audit that followed that up, that proved that $38 million of that was legit, and it wouldn't have affected a single benefit of a single person employed by the USDs. And we wouldn't even do that. That was handed to you as a post audit that said it was absolutely a confirmed savings, just administratively. If you did the whole thing, it was like $65 million, but that would have started to affect kind of the Cadillac plans of some of the schools, Wichita being one of them, their employees don't contribute at the same level that most plans do. So, but even without that, you had $38 million in savings on top of that. So all these bad things are still there, and you're still showing red letters 24 months out in the budget, even with this big tax plan. And by the way, the flat tax that was floated was less punitive as analyzed by research to the poor. So there's just a whole host of things that are wrong with that statement. The point is, this legislature wanted to spend more money. We inflated the budget. We added hundreds of millions in new spending, called that the new deficit, and then tried to sell to the public that we have to raise taxes to fill this deficit. The truth was, which was exposed, by the way, in the balanced budget plan we put forward, you could have made your capers payments and caught up. That whole scare of the securitization of the tobacco money, that's synonymous to like taking a lump sum on lottery winnings. That was versus a payout. It was a lawsuit that settled. There's money coming in. Would not have affected at all, at least the way we had it in our budget. The Children's Initiative Fund, or parents as teachers, or Tiny K, or all those emotional issues, they all still get paid. And you simply took that one-time money and paid capers whole. So you didn't have the debt, which would have helped our bond rating, by the way, because the bond rating isn't so much our spending expenses, it's the fact that we are not making payments. And by the way, we're still not making those payments. This would have caught all those payments up and could have actually effectively helped our bond rating and not made taxes retroactive. So I contend that the real deficit maybe would have been 200 million-ish, not 1.2 billion-ish. And then you could have had a real conversation about what is the need on the revenue side. You could have just stopped new spending, taken the savings that were real, and we put the savings even in 2019, not 18, to make sure you could realize that through law. So all those are factual and verifiable, and it didn't have to happen the way it was. The truth is, there's just too many up there that wanted to go that direction.
Okay, Dan?
Well, I don't agree with most of that. I mean, that's an idea, that's a plan, but I'd like to see that happen. I'd like to see the real results if you actually did all of that. And besides that, the budget we just passed has a 0.1% increase in spending overall. And when you add the K through 12, the piece that we had to put in there, it jumps it to 4%. So $489 million is K through 12. And the judiciary asked for $20 million in enhancement. We didn't do that. The governor wanted $58 million for cybersecurity. We didn't do that. There were several plans where we didn't include extra spending. We tried to hold the line, and the task of the Ways and Means Committee, we went into budgets, the chair told us no enhancements on any of the budget proposals we get. And we stuck basically to that, except for mental health and behavioral ones, the home and community-based services, who haven't had a pay raise, are paying those folks $9 an hour to do their work, and they can't get enough people. Starkey and Catch, those programs here in Wichita, $8-9 an hour they pay their help. For how many years it's been? They haven't had a raise in 8 years. So it was time we spent that $20 million that was going to the judiciary, put that in a pay raise for state employees who had with some stipulation on it, and that also went to mental health. And that's where that money went, the $20 million. So we didn't spend that, we spent it on the existing program for state employees. And so we held the line on spending as much as you possibly could under that environment. And we had pretty well agreement. Yeah, everybody agreed. There was a lot of times you could spend a lot more money, but we didn't. That K through 12 was the big culprit. We cost us $489 million more dollars, and that's how that, according to the finance formula. So it was tough doing, but we had our limits. We had a compromise with other members to get to that end, and that's what we ended up.
Okay. Les, what say you?
Well, I go along a lot with what I had to say. I know in the House side, you may not want to believe it or whatever, but there was a lot of the new House reps that sat right there and looked me dead in the eye and said, I'm sent up here to raise taxes. When you start discussing looking at cutting, people say, well, you can't find cutting in the government. There's duplicated services within the departments up there in Topeka. Revenue and Commerce collect the same data. I've approached it and said, why can't you just make it where one collects it and they both can share it? That's a cost saving. There's a lot of that goes on up there. But yeah, and then your department heads, they'll come up there and say, well, I need this or that, or they won't give you the whole story. This year, we caught them in a couple of things where they wasn't telling us what they really was supposed to be telling us. They hide where they'll say, well, we got X amount of employees. But when it comes down to it, they don't need this X amount. They're stockpiling some of their money. And we've caught them at it. But yet I can't get enough reps to be willing to stand up and say, hey, we need to pull this back. And that's where it's at.
And spending originates in the House, so, you can't blame the
It's a tough
Senate
job.
for that. So, okay, we're gonna open this for questions. Looks like James has one right off the bat here. Go ahead, James.
I'll make a statement, people. Help you understand why it costs so much. I graduated from Wichita State University many years ago. And I was teaching school. I had a lot of experience electrician. I went over there and asked electrician something. They looked at my experience and they got me better. I worked at Wichita State for several years in the summertime. Later on, I quit there. I had about $500 a month. I couldn't keep my family. I had a chance to work a lot more than
Jim, we need to get to the question. We're having a real hard time hearing you. I've already asked him to be quiet with the ice over there, but
I went to work Santa Fe Railroad a lot more than there. Now, I
Please
laid off.
speak louder if you can.
yeah, get to the question, Jim.
But people, a lot of waste in your state offices today. Let's one. I watched that institution buy a system for temperature control, computer control, and show who bought it. 30 samples on the lake, but trip to the Caribbean for 2 weeks. Janitorial supplies are notorious for kickbacks and a lot of other things. Now, you can talk all you want to. Don't tell me they can't cut.
Right, Jim, that's enough for them to address. All right, we're gonna start with you, Dan. Jim is worried about government wasteful spending, and he's mentioning specifically kickbacks on things like janitorial supplies. Am I getting that right, James? Okay, can you go ahead and address that? And I'm gonna go ahead and address these people about the ice maker making noise.
Good luck there, Mark. Well, I don't know if you have specifics on the kickbacks and stuff, information. I'm not saying there aren't any, but we have to have.
There it is.
Let's see what they are and let's investigate it then.
Why don't you look into it?
Give me the information.
You're off.
We'll look into it. We'll look into it. You tell me what it
You
is.
haven't looked into it yet.
Well, every agency, in the last 4 years, the governor started with 5% cuts across the board. Everybody. So don't tell me haven't been cutting. And none of those budgets were increased. And they've actually came along with the higher ed. All of them did the same thing. And this last year, we didn't have any, but there has been cuts all along. Because I served on the Ways and Means Committee for the last 4 years, too, with Chairman Masterson. And he did a really good job as Ways and Means Chair. He knows what he's doing, and information stuff. And we did the same thing. We were limited. We were not going to do enhancements. And so we were looking for cuts and stuff and those kinds of things, too. So, and if you listen to higher ed, we sound like we butchered them. So, according to them. But anyway, there's a conscious effort to control the spending. It's we can't get it all, but we're looking for it all the time. That's on the radar all the time.
Les, how would you answer that question?
Well, Jim, you heard my answer earlier. I've been looking.
It's there.
And I tell you what the problem is. I can find it, but it's bringing along the other 124 House members or enough with me to get the votes that I need to cut the spending.
Somebody greasing their palm with green.
Well, I'm just telling you
I'll
that,
tell you what it is too.
but I understand, and I went up there looking for ways to cut spending, and you gotta get the votes to do it. Ty, I'll let you go next, bud.
I would just say you really get into the issue there of pounds and pennies, right? So there are those pennies to be found inside those agencies. They really are, and that's why I agreed with it when we went through. We would just trim the budget of the agency by a percentage, so because I don't know who's getting what, and I can't legislate this, but if you've got a good head of an agency, they can find that stuff, and if you're trimming the budget, they're gonna wanna cut the waste, but if they have plenty to spend, they're not even looking, right? It's the nature of large entities, but our big problems in the state, from a spending perspective, are, I've always called the big three, pensions, and the social services and K-12 education are the big drivers. That is 88% of our budget. And those are, if you call those untouchable, you really are scraping for pennies under the cushion, relatively, right? It could be significant, hundreds of thousands, maybe a million or two get in these areas, but when you're talking about a budget that is in effect $16 billion, you've got to be able to get into your big cost drivers, like the K-12 education, like pensions. We've got to get off the defined benefit system, because it's eating not just us. And we're not alone. Kansas isn't alone. I just was at an interstate conference, and Kansas is not alone. And these are not states that raise taxes, that cut spending or anything. They raise taxes and still have budget crises because of pensions and their education systems. It's weighing down on many states.
Andy, is there a question on your mind?
Yeah, kind of go along with that, with the education specifically, close to 60% of our state budget. What's it gonna take for both chambers to start standing up to the Supreme Court and address the financial budgetary issues, start cutting education itself, and then when the Supreme Court, tries to block it, we end up sticking to our guns there.
Les, can you lead off on that one?
Boy, I tell you what, the last 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years that I've been in the House, I've stood up and said, why don't we do this with the Supreme Court? I've even tried to introduce a proviso that said that the school could not use your tax dollars to sue the state for more money. And guess what? Every time I tried to introduce a proviso, it got kicked off by the chair of the tax committee or the budget committee. That's one way you stop. But you gotta have people that are willing to stand up with you. We have 40 in the House. I call us a strong 40 out of 125. That ain't enough to make it. Not when you're looking at, it takes only, 51%? 63 to pass? And we only got 40 of us that are gonna stand up and say, this is what we need to do. Constituents need to start getting on it. That's all I can say. That's my answer to it.
If I'm answering the same question, the short answer is an activated base in a couple election cycles is what it's going to take, because again, this group that we have right now is a group that wants to concede. They like the leverage because they want to spend the money. And that's true. You can tell, and it's in our own party. We're the Republican Assembly here, but it's in our party. The greatest example of that, I think, is the Kansas Senate. Prior to the 2016 elections, we had 32 Republicans and 8 Democrats. Post 2016, we have 31 Republicans and 9 Democrats, and the one seat that changed was a gimme seat, the O'Donnell seat, that was fortunate it was ever Republican anyway, because it's a pretty heavy Democrat district. But it is a 180 in ideology in that building, and you can see it. $1.2 billion tax increase and a governor override. There is a supermajority up there. Well, there's a majority and a couple on the edge that are getting pushed to make supermajorities to make this thing go the direction it is. And so we have to hit it. We're not going to change anything with the situation we're in with the courts until we have a constitutional amendment that takes the word suitable back out of the Constitution, because or we change the court over to a true constructionist court that says we're just going to follow the law and not make it up. And until you get the people to rise up, that isn't going to change, because those lawsuits will keep coming regardless of the court. We've been sued. This is like our 7th time. Gannon is number 7, and not until we had a full Sebelius court did they weigh in and say we have a role. And so you got the Montoy case and you got the Gannon case, where they are proactively against the legislature and mandating you spend, I mean, they're not giving an X amount, but you have to spend just more than you are now, right? That's what they're saying. Until you get the court back, you're gonna have this constant paralysis. You gotta change the Constitution or get enough members up there to really take the court on.
This is building people. People are getting mad, like this in this nation. This last election for president. People went, oh, Hillary's going in, Hillary's running. People in America are fed up. She didn't win, my goodness, right? I can't understand. People are getting fed up.
Jim,
They get
we
fed
want,
up.
we want to keep this moving. We want to give everybody a chance to get a question. This young lady here, go ahead. What's your question?
Mine was something about committee or something. Why can't we get loans into the committee?
Go ahead, speak up, because Ty's going to
I
have
said,
to.
why can't we get what I call loans into the committee? The only reason you're gonna get things changed is to get people on those committees and different things, work them up in there some way or another. I don't know how they do it, but there's gotta be a way to get people into those committees and different things that's going on in there, and I call them homes. So they know what's going on and they can be your ears to tell you
Well,
what's
it's-
happening with things.
I'll let Ty answer that for you. Ty.
So then, just to clarify the question, you're talking about members on the committees, or are you talking about the public in sitting at the committee listening to what's going on?
Well, I'm talking about finding, I guess I must.
You are right, the committees are very important to the process.
Some way of getting members in there on that committee, work their way up there some way. I don't know how people get them in there, but get them in there some way, and let them be your, like your ears and
That-
things and knows what's
The
going
committee
on.
makeup keys on
And
leadership.
change, and make the change of it.
So the Speaker of the House, President of the Senate now, actually that's new for the President of the Senate. This is the first time in decades that a single person in the Senate was able to actually put rosters on the committees, and you saw the makeup of the committee. So when you have committees made up the way they are, they're not going to come out with the kind of legislation that you would like to see, and that you're hamstrung. You are right, that all that work happens in the committee, and from the sense of a conservative movement, you're hamstrung from the beginning. You don't have any way to get that through the process unless you have a majority
Once you get
with that
spies up
ideology.
in there, I call them spies. You can get people up in there, they can tell you what's going on and stuff, you can give feedback back down some way, or you can do things change.
Well, there are groups that even we had, the Truth Caucus had people that we were putting into committees we didn't sit on to try to get feedback, and we were trying to get people to put it out on, Facebook and social media, because I'm telling you, the reporters will not report anything favorable to the conservative movement. I've just become probably cynical to a certain point of my time there, how disconnected the understanding of the general population is to what is really going on, because we still are old school in Kansas in our media. Most people watch the evening news and read a local paper. And that is not an accurate depiction of what is going on, and quite frankly, doesn't represent the majority.
Dan, what do you have to say about the committees and the question on getting a mole in the committee?
I call it a move.
That's fine. Yeah, we understand mole. I think we all understand the term.
I somebody from the Tea Party.
I don't have any problem with, I don't have any problem with anybody serving on a committee, and for the most part, I mean, they're appointed, but, I think you can find out what's going on just if you come to the committee meeting and you ask any of those members themselves, what are you doing? What are you talking about? Or read their newsletter or something. I mean, I think there's accountability, and there's people who are being responsive. It's just like with the Supreme Court we talked about a little bit ago. I didn't get a chance on that one. But you talk about everybody's fed up with the Supreme Court, and we are too. And we had our chance last election to non-retain. And what happened? We couldn't even get close. That's you people all at home here. Everybody else has to get up and vote, say we don't want you folks in there anymore. We want to change that. Now the Senate, we passed a constitutional amendment in the Senate that would change the makeup of the court, but that's as far as it got. It couldn't pass in the House. So it's the same thing with justice. I thought we were so close with the Carr brothers and all the bad information against them that they would non-retain at least one of them, and the whole thing turned on us. They blamed the governor because he wanted it done, so everybody voted against it.
Yeah, that's the Supreme Court, that's a different conversation. We
Yeah.
worked hard, we tried to.
Yeah.
But people are, it's the way it's set up. It's a
Yeah.
non-retain, and it makes people feel like they're firing somebody to
Yeah.
non-retain, which
I
you
didn't get
are.
a chance to
But they're not,
answer that.
yeah, I understand. This is a good answer, good
And
answer.
that goes back to the
Okay.
information chain, Mark, of.
Right.
They really, the media and the machine made that more about education, right, than it was about.
Exactly, and it was-
And so that the general population only has that media stream, that's all, that's how they're.
Les,
gonna
you
go.
get to address the committee question if you want to have
Committee, well-
anything, if you can add anything to it. Don't feel like you have to.
The thing with the committees, people have to understand, the committee makeup is done by leadership. We have no input. We write out a piece of paper and I put on there, I want veterans, I want this committee, that committee, or this other committee. Then the leadership of the House and the Senate look at that paper and they decide where they're gonna put you. I've never been off of the 3 committees that I'm on since I've been in the House. I'm now the chair of the Veterans Committee, I'm on Judiciary, and I'm on Health and Human Services. And I've been on those ever since I've been in the House of Representatives. But it's wherever that speaker wants to put you, that's where you end up. You don't have a say, per se.
All right. Debbie, did you have a question? No? Okay, Carl?
I'm still looking for somebody to explain school finance to me with a big chief tablet and crayon. Haven't been successful at that. But it appears that there's a lot more money going into administration with higher increases in their salaries than the teachers in the classroom. Is there some way we can address that?
I got it.
Dan, your turn up and go first.
Well, that's been talked about a lot and tried, and eventually it has to end up with your local school board. They're going to decide how many administrators are in their district. If they're going to have a superintendent, assistant, another assistant, and all that, the school board has that power. We allocate the money, but we aren't going to make a law telling you how you're going to do it, because that's what local control is, and I have no problem with that. But you're right, and some districts are worse than others. But when I got my first year, I was elected. Dale Dennis, who runs the Board of Education, who's the expert on school finance, and he really is, he told us we had an hour to talk about the school funding formula. And he said, I'm trying to tell you in an hour what should take a college course for 3 years to teach. That's how much is it. And this last year, in the Senate too, we had a special select committee on school finance, and the House worked on that from January clear through till March or April. And then we took it over and we put a conference together. But hours and hours on that, because it is so convoluted with weightings and at risk. But I thought the majority leader did a real fine job of putting the money where it's supposed to be. We did what the court said. We addressed with all-day kindergarten, those kinds of things, put that money at risk, and the court, when they looked at it, didn't even mention it. And I still, today, will stand by the new form that we came up with, if they will stand the test of time. And the majority leader said too, we can prove that what they asked us to do, we did in that formula. Everything they asked, and reasonably calculated. The definition for reasonably calculated, he did it exactly the way the court said we should do it. And we're waiting for their decision. And that just, there it is, all that time and effort. And that was the big dog in the fight, too, school finance. Because if you're in contempt of the court, it's like telling a policeman he can't give you a ticket. Yes, he can. I mean, our hands are tied, unfortunately, but we've been working at that, still are.
Last comments on education funding.
Are you talking about the percent of money that goes, when they get the money, the percent that goes into the classroom and the percent that stays in admin? Is that what you're talking about?
I'm not sure I know enough to know what I'm talking about. That's why I
Well,
want that big chief tablet
Let
and
me,
crayon.
I tell you what. I know that in 2011, 2012, 13 and 14, we tried to introduce mandate where they had to put 65% of their money down into the classroom. That's teachers, supplies, and all that stuff. And then 35% of the money was for admin. We have never been able to pass that. That came from a former speaker, Mike O'Neill. And we've tried, but we've never been able to get that. And I know exactly what you're talking about, because when you break it down, only about 53%, 54% actually making it to the class. The rest is in that. But yes, there's some of us that have tried to reverse that and get more going into the classroom, but we've never been successful.
That's shocking.
Well, this is gonna expose another disconnect between me and Dan, but that's my big problem. We did exactly what the court told us to do, reasonably calculate a bigger number, which isn't their role, number one.
Amen.
Two,
When are we gonna have that conversation?
well, that was the prior question. Two, the formula we reinstituted was just a regurgitation of the old formula we had from '92 to where we have now. It was some tweaks to it, but that's what that formula was. And it is system-centric, not student-centric. So now it takes a student waiting to calculate a number, but that's it. And there is truth that it's disconnect between the local board and the state. You have a disconnect between who's raising the money and who's spending the money. It's like if I told my wife she can just spend whatever I give her, right? We're gonna have a different relationship. And that's kind of what we have right now. So the local boards spend it, and we don't have any control internally. So that's how you end up with a disconnect of what goes where, and we buy lots of Suburbans and things, and it doesn't make it to the teacher. But I'd go further than that. This formula we have, it allows for things. It's really a series of formulas. That's how complicated, and they keep it complicated for a reason. Because it reinstitutes this grand deception to the public of base state aid, which is just a big lie. It's a piece of a formula, but it gives the perception to the public that we spend about $4,000 a student, with no kid's worth just one. We got the multipliers, but that's what it allows for, and you can actually increase spending and lower the base state aid. And so then you get these people out here, predominantly the Anthony Hensleys of the world, the Democrats, that say, we haven't, base state aid's the same as it was 20 years ago. We haven't increased inflation. And that's true, because we've used the other side of the multiplier. And so you actually have increased by nearly double. There was an interesting thing. I went in and listened to Mark Tallman, Kansas Association of School Boards. He was giving, I had put in basically a taxpayer bill of rights that said you can only grow so much. This was when they were having a hearing. And he said we couldn't do that because if we'd have only increased spending on education by population and inflation, we'd only be spending half what we spend now.
Well, that would be perfect.
And he said he used that in his testimony. So I don't know how on one side you say we haven't grown enough, we haven't even grown the rate of inflation. On this side, if we'd only grown by the rate of inflation, we'd be spending half. That formula, it allows for things to happen too, like the subset of the formula, you have this local option or LOB, where you get defined by poverty is the value of your district divided by the number of pupils. So it's valuation per person. So that allows for every kid that leaves Western Kansas, they get richer in the formula because the denominator is the number of pupils. So in comparison, they become comparatively wealthy to Blue Valley, which is the richest school district in our state. Well, actually, Shawnee Mission by property, but by pupil, it's Blue Valley. And they start getting poverty aid from the rest of us because they're perceptively poor to this school district that has oil and no kids. That's what this formula allows for, and that's what we just reinstituted.
Agreed. Okay, another question? Go ahead, Brian.
Not a question, more of a statement. I just wanted to point out that the last meeting was over the school board members. Since they're the ones in the reins of the spending, it might be worth a look, checking out the video from June.
Very good point. Brian, thank you. That's why we found this video to be very handy. Months later, somebody's going to come back and look at what you're saying now. So I'm really glad you're here. Thank you. By the way, I put a link to that on your agenda, so you can look at that last meeting or go back and look at any of the previous meetings which we had the videotape on. Okay, Art, you have a question?
Well, I was just going to mention, you had a link on your email too.
Yes, the link is there, and you'll find it, and we're going to improve the website. Glenn, go ahead, question.
Heard good answers on both sides of the question on tax increase. But
still very confused. So is there good written documentation that kind of explains both sides of the story that I can go to get a better understanding of?
Okay, Glenn, by the way, we're gonna have two more questions and we're gonna call it off. So where were we at? Did you go first last time, Dan?
I don't
Or who
remember.
went first last
I
time?
think I went last time, so.
Okay, you went last, so go ahead, Dan.
You're asking for,
Well, repeat the question as concisely
to
as you
find
can.
out the information on both sides?
Yes, written documentation.
Well, there was no, the document itself is like, the legislative research sends this out. It tells all the factual things that, what's in there, what's all in there, how it went, and that. The idea, whether you agree with it or not, is not in there. It's just the facts. And you can ask for explanations, like a newsletter or something like that, on just like we're doing tonight. Ask somebody who agrees or disagrees. But if you read through that and see what's in there, it's kind of self-explanatory. You know, you can understand it, whether or not what tax was, whether there's a property tax deduction in there now, and there is now, and those kinds of things. That's all the facts that are in there. The whole thing's analyzed. So, and I'd be glad to explain it, send you my newsletter or whatever it is too. If you had questions, feel free to ask them.
Can I have a clarifying question? Are you talking about the nuts and bolts of top rate went from 4.6 to 5.2, business went from 0 to 5, those types of things? Are you looking for why we voted one way or why we?
Kind of a high level the arguments for and against.
If you're looking at the high level arguments for and against, you'd probably want to look at, well, we have a Truth Cox website. I'll tell you, you go there, you'll find the arguments against. But you can go to some place like, say, Kansas or traditional Republican majority or one of those places, and I'm sure they'll give you the great arguments for it.
I don't belong to those, but I'll give you the right argument anyway.
Les, did you want to make a comment on that? No?
No,
Okay.
yes.
All right. Debbie, you haven't had a question yet. Go ahead.
This question is for Dan. You were lamenting having senior citizens pay a higher tax, but yet you went for 1.2 billion increase. So how do you justify that? And number two, are you already planning to spend more next year and raise our taxes again? Because I know there's chatter about that, and I want to know if you're on that side again.
I would say next year is a ways off yet, but at this point,
You can still answer that question.
I don't plan to vote for a tax increase this next
I
year.
can hold you to that.
You can hold that to me. Now, if there's a fee on equipment or a building, something like that is different, but outright income tax increase, I won't support. We thought this one was large enough that we want to be able to cover our numbers and get us back on good ground and not have to do that again.
Well, I don't believe that, but go ahead and finish answering.
What's the rest of it? What was the other
The
question?
rest of it was, how do you justify raising taxes that high when you started out by saying you didn't want senior citizens to have to pay more because they're on fixed income? So how do you justify that?
Well, the old rate was 3%, it's 3.1. I mean, that was the number, that was the compromise.
What's 3.1?
The tax on the new tax plan, individual income tax.
So every elderly person in the state is not gonna pay more than 3.1%. Is that what you just said?
Income tax, on their income tax. And they have their deductions still yet too. Standard deduction, everything, all that's the same.
So why did you have to raise taxes like that in order to give them such a low rate when they already have it?
Well, because it's on the high end. It's 5.7 on the top end, 5.2 in the middle, over 30,000. So they still got to, and they still have the earned income tax credit, and those kinds of things are still in there. So
That doesn't justify the tax increase, sorry.
I'm sorry you feel that, but
Debbie,
we
did
have a
you
balanced
intend that
budget.
question for, I'm sorry, Dan, it took me to interrupt. Did you intend that question for Ty and?
It was for Dan, but if they want to.
Okay, do you want to address any of Debbie's question?
Well, I certainly hope we don't try to raise taxes again next year. I mean, after $1.2 billion, I mean, in the budget cycle, I mean, good grief, if you have to go back to the taxpayer again the very next year, I mean, how incompetent is that even when you're raising taxes? We shouldn't be that high as they are. We shouldn't be as high as they are now. And it went from 2.7 to 3.1.
All right, Terry in the back here.
The past few years, we've given small businesses a tax incentive. That was the governor's big plan that appears to be highly ineffective in stimulating our economy. Could you all comment on that, maybe give us a reason why that is?
I'll start with that one. I would disagree with the fact that it's highly ineffective. I mean, we're in basically a rural recession, right? None of the agricultural states have been growing, number one. And even amongst that, we have low unemployment, and when we first did that, we were winning the battle in Missouri, Johnson County, Jackson County, on the border where it's immediately seen and behaviors affected fast. You can go to the Rich States, Poor States.com, and there's a whole article where they went in and researched that particular piece of the law and how it was being effective, and we were winning those battles. Migration was happening, and then when we started raising taxes, we started losing again. And these are just number cruncher guys. These aren't political. These are just policy analysts. And so I disagree with the fact it wasn't. That's what everybody wants you to believe was happening. They want you to believe that was the problem, and it was completely ineffective. Both of which are false.
Yeah.
Well, I voted for the 2012 tax cut myself. I thought it was a good idea, and with the March to zero, I had some questions about it. And before I made the final vote, the governor's office and the speaker and everybody came to my office and wanted to know how I was going to vote. I said I wanted to vote for it, but we don't. What happens if it don't? What if we don't have revenue? What if we get $200 million more in Medicaid payments that we can't account for? And they said, we know what we're doing. That's not going to happen because we ain't going to put ourselves in that position. Guess what? It did happen. And what it was, if we'd have fixed it 2 years ago and made some adjustments, we wouldn't have been in this fix because it went to March to zero. It's like cutting your arm off. You can't get twice as much work done. You got one less arm. Unfortunately, they promised us 5% growth, 4 and 5%. We got 0.3 is what our growth was for the last 4 years. 0.3% growth.
0.3 of 1%.
Of 1%. That's what Kansas is.
Disconnected to the tax policy. The tax policy wasn't the reason for 0.3 growth. The national economy under Obama was the rationale. So it is true that if we'd have had the projected growth that we projected, by the way, for the last 30 years, there wouldn't have been. So there had to be some response. I don't disagree with that. There had to be some response on either the spending or tax side, or both. I could have contended with that. And looking, hindsight is what it is. And that tax cut was larger than intended. If they'd have probably put some type of cap on it, because what was happening, and by the way, the funny thing is you had all these Democrat lawyers were the ones out bragging about how they were abusing it, right? I don't pay taxes, That's who was out there abusing it. It was intended not to tax the business, but it was an intention to tax. If I'm taking money out of my business to buy myself a new car, that's income to me. And so there was some disconnect in how that was put together that should have been addressed and wasn't, which exacerbated the problem. But the fact isn't the problem wasn't the underlying policy itself.
Okay, I said I was going to have a last question. I'm going to go ahead and give you the last question. Then you and Andy, you close it out. But we'll try to keep these concise. Go
I'm just
ahead.
curious how come we have to have an income tax anyway? Because we found a way to become citizens of Florida. Florida, we don't have an income tax. And their property taxes are a little bit higher. Their sales taxes no higher than what they are right here. Why do we have to have an income tax?
Okay, so why do some states have to have an income tax and others don't? Is that pretty much the question? Okay, so let's start with Wes.
Well, with Florida, it's pretty easy. How much tourism comes into Florida?
Quite a bit.
Okay? That's why they can do some of the stuff they do. It's just like Wyoming. Wyoming gets away with not having a lot of taxes.
They don't have any.
Why? Why? Because
There's no population.
No, they're exporting a lot of coal out there too. I'm just saying, each state is different.
People are going there to live.
Right.
Florida.
And people are going to Colorado from California now because California.
They're also going to Oklahoma. They're trying to get out of here.
So.
I hear it all the time.
I understand. I hear it too.
If sold their house, we're going to Oklahoma. They tax them cheaper.
I hear it. I hear it.
I would tell you that that's been analyzed as well. You go to that rich
Yep.
states, poor states, and they have comparison charts of these states that have no income tax versus the high income tax state and how they performed. And I'll tell you what, and every state is different. And obviously Florida has an advantage with tourism and things like that. But that's not the big part of the story. States with no income tax, Tennessee, for example, Texas, they generally spend less per person than the states that have instituted the taxes. So they're living on less, right, than we are. And we've gotten accustomed to it. I would tell you this, it is almost impossible to back up a tax once it's, I mean, I don't know what it is, but it's almost impossible to reverse it. Kansas has gotten used to an income tax. It's gonna be a long time before we get rid of it. The original ratchet, Marston's year, had nothing to do with the Brownback plan or which, by the way, I wrote back in 2008 maybe or 7. And all it did was, as long as you had growth in your revenues, a certain portion of that would ratchet your income tax down. That's the only way you're going to ever get rid of it. You got to slowly wean your state off of it until you're at the point you can drop it.
That's it.
Amen. You want to jump in on that one, Dan, or do you have anything to add?
I basically agree with most of
Okay,
that,
very
but I
good.
would say
That
that
was-
the program we have is the income tax helps us keep property tax lower, because property tax is what everybody hates even more. And we don't want a lot of more property tax. Income tax would be more desirable. If there's a better of the two, income tax is that way. And besides that, if you make money, you pay tax. If you don't pay any tax. That's what's
That's true.
better
Property
about
tax is definitely the
property
most
tax. You're stuck with
hated
that.
tax. Everybody hates property
Make
tax
the
above
taxes
all.
so sweet that everybody wants to.
That would be income tax, and that's what they raised. Okay, go ahead with your question here, back in the corner. Thank you.
Well, my question is a little different because I know we're supposed to ask you the questions, but my question is, could I bring a little real time to these topics? Simply because our life experience puts us
Sure.
in a couple of the categories that were brought up. We have had a disabled daughter for 30 years who was brain injured in a car wreck. So I'm very familiar with Central County Disability Services and the agencies. So I would like to comment to you some things maybe you don't know if you're not real familiar. Number one, the Democrats promised more money for votes. They actually come to all of the meetings when we're in a voting session, when we're campaigning. And they actually do get the disabled people who don't have a clue. They tell all the caregivers they're not making enough money. And true, it's low, like you said, Mr. Kerschen, $8, $9 an hour. But a lot of the people that do those jobs are very willing to do it for them because they also don't have a lot of other expenses. Sometimes they're given meals, housing. So it does work. So they were promised a raise though in this last voting campaign. And they got it. It's $0.25 an hour. We have 2 workers. And they did get $0.25 an hour. There's probably a whole lot of money though being thrown into bureaucracy. And that's where most of it goes. Just like we have fears about the education, that as you throw a whole lot more money into something, quickly there's a whole bunch of people waiting to gobble it up or increase the paperwork. So that's all we've done in all these years.
Okay, did you have a question with that, or you don't have
Well, I asked
to?
them if I could address those things.
Yeah,
They may
okay.
not
No,
see
that's
it.
fine.
So
That's
I
fine.
wanted to know that. They're bragging about the pay increase. It happened immediately when the veto was overridden. The pay raise went into effect.
But they
It's
end up
very
with
small.
25 cents an hour.
Yeah, it's very small. That's, it's pretty much insignificant, but I believe the actual money, the real money, is probably big. Because they campaign real hard, and they do take the disabled people who don't really understand how to vote.
Okay.
I don't like that.
All right, we have to move along here. I'm looking at the clock
The real
here.
minute is, Jim and I are still part owners of our little construction business that we've had for 25 years. We worked really hard, and it's hard to make it when you've got the federal government as a business partner who is always there on the table. The best thing that ever happened to us was when Brownback took away state income tax. We were coming up really looking good and heading for retirement. We were set up for our estimated payments this year at around $300 a quarter because we only own a few shares. I still do accounting, he still consults. We just got a letter from our accountant to make sure we'd have an extra $4,600 on top of what we owe this year. So Thank you for allowing me to say this. I want to put that in real terms. We're not rich people.
And that 4,000 goes to the state, not to the federal?
Absolutely.
My gosh, that is
Can I
big.
just say thank you for the
appreciate
life you live of
perspective on that.
sacrifice? I have a cousin.
sorry?
I have a cousin that was brain injured at 16, and I've watched her parents. So I just wanted to say thank you for the life you live of sacrifice in that. 'Cause that's a big deal. A lot of people don't see or get
Yeah,
credit for, and I appreciate those all
But
everything.
there are
you
so
said.
many layers to the bureaucracy. One agency can handle these individuals.
By the way, we raised payroll taxes on that same person that got that quarter, 24%.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So they're gonna end up with a net
Net
reduction,
loss.
a net loss.
Well, it's probably not a net loss because it's 24% of their Kansas.
So
but it's-
1%.
It's
A 1%.
we gave it in one hand and took it away in the
The
other.
other. Okay, Les, did you wanna address, the
No,
comment
just-
or
I
anything?
understand what
Dan?
she's saying.
Did you wanna add anything to what she's
No,
saying?
that's, I understand that,
$4,000
yeah.
more?
No.
Andy, you, the last question, I'm sorry, Art, unless you can make it really fast.
I'll make it really fast. On the Kansas Supreme Court, just how far can they really go in the face of the struggling taxpayers?
I think it's as far as we'll let them. What's the
I
comment?
think that is actually a true statement. The truth is, the jury's out. Never happened before, so we don't know. So it's how far the Kansas people let them. I mean, theoretically, they shut schools down. I don't think they'd ever do that because the uprising would be enormous. I'd like for them to
I
trust.
have a quick little two-part deal with the latest current event with the state prison issue and the salaries for the officers there. The first part of the question is, do we see a tax hike coming into the next legislative session of, right now it's the immediate $10 million to cool out whatever it is later on. The second part is, if this has been an issue ongoing for a while, when we did this massive tax increase in this last one.
Okay, everybody understand the question? Who wants to go first?
Well,
Go ahead, Dan.
there is money, there will be money to pay for that. And I dare say if we had not done the budget we did, there wouldn't be any money. As a matter of fact, we had not voted for an override, we'd still be in Topeka, I think. Because there was no consensus after that. I mean, we had lost everything, but we got the thing done, and there is money to pay for that. That's the only reason there is, because we have a tax plan. Unfortunately, it's a tax plan, but that's what's gonna pay for it. And I was in El Dorado Prison 2 years ago, from a whole day tour in the building. And at that time, they had a 30% turnover on their prison guards. And they had pretty good employees, they had a good benefit plan, but they told us they're making $12.99 an hour, starting at. And they said, that's not sustainable. They can go down to Hutchinson and work as a welder for 22. So, there's the disconnect. And so what do you do if you got plenty of people willing to work at low unemployment right now? It's tough to find people to want to work like that for that kind of a pay. So how do you get them in there? You got to have good benefits or something. So we want to try to improve that. And they said it 2 years ago, but we didn't have the money to pay it.
Two things. One question about why wasn't in there, because we even prioritized K-12 over public safety. And this is where we're at. I mean, you could have given, the 400-some million to K-12. You could think out the 10 million could have gone to prisons, right? But you'd been, so that's why we prioritize that so heavily, especially with the court influence, that it even takes precedence over public safety at some level. And then the tax increase, there should be, with as big as that tax increase was, there should be money flowing for all of that. There should be. That's why I think part of the reason they wanted to raise it so big right now, because there's a short-term memory in the general population, and they're hoping by the end, because we don't have elections till the end of 18, that everybody's going to be forgotten about that. It would have never happened in an election year, but it wasn't. That's why the push was this year.
Okay. Les, do you want to make a further comment?
No,
All right, let's give these people a hand. Let's give them a big round. I really appreciate the comments. I think this is a very good discussion. I learned a lot tonight. If you'll just sit tight for a second, we've got no old business. We've got all that pending old business taken care of, but I have a new item, item H on your agenda. I want to kind of get a consensus vote here on hiring a paid KRA executive director. I have a gentleman in mind, Myron Ackerman. He's already filled out his application on Upwork, so we wouldn't have to worry about any W-2 forms and all the employment stuff. We would be paying him only out of the money he raises for us. And, we'll try to keep it under 50%. But I'll work it out, and we'll talk about the details as we go forward. But I want to have any discussion from those of you that are paid voting members. Is there anybody that has an objection to me trying this and hiring Myron through Upwork?
Is this something we could do for 3, 4, 6 months, and if it wasn't working out?
Absolutely, absolutely, yep. Upwork will take care of everything. I don't have to worry about any employment taxes, Medicare, Social Security, all the paperwork is done. And then we'll have to pay more depending on how much he makes overall and so on. They have a computer formula to figure out exactly how much we pay for him. But it's not real high. I use Upwork already for the Kansas Coalition for Life whenever it's something that we can't get done with volunteer work. So I think that he could increase our volunteers. I think it's impossible that we would go backwards on the money, because he's going to only get paid out of the money that he earns for us. And so I want to give it a try, but I want to see if there's any objections. Debbie especially, I haven't had, you're for it, okay. Anybody else that's see thumbs up? Okay, well, sounds good. Debbie, you want to put that in the form of a motion to go ahead and hire Myron? Just say so moved. Do I have a second on that? Art Gentry, oh, we don't have a camera going. The camera ran out of battery, I'm assuming here.
We still have audio.
Oh, we have audio, okay, very good. And thank you for maintaining that audio. It's been moved and seconded that we go ahead and hire Myron Ackerman as a paid executive director for the KRA. All in favor signify by saying aye. Oh, pardon me?
Should we modify the motion to say 4, 5, or 6 months?
Oh, okay, very good. We got a friendly amendment here to the motion. Beverly is recommending that we add the stipulation that we are going to hire him for 6 months to see how this works out in 6 months.
And then review it.
And then review it in 6 months. I think that's a good, friendly amendment. Let's all vote on that motion again with the friendly amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, Myron's hired. The Pachyderm meets Fridays at noon on the 9th floor of the Ruffin Building. If you are not a member of the Wichita Pachyderm Club, your first meal is on me. I used to be president of the Pachyderm Club and helped grow it from its very beginning. And I'm their most prolific new member getter. And so if you'd like to join the Pachyderm Club and want to see what that's all about, get with me afterwards, and I'll tell you it's tomorrow at noon, less than 24 hours away. We have excellent programs. John Stevens and John Todd are running it now, and they are just doing fabulous in terms of the speakers that they get. And so if you want to join the Pachyderm, talk to me, and I will pay for your meal tomorrow and introduce you to the right people to sign you up and get you on the membership roster of the Pachyderm Club as well. Item J, well, actually, before I jump there, I wanted to, Art, you had something on your mind before, or is it covered?
Yeah, just a real brief comment.
Go ahead.
I disagree on this Senator Kershen's veto override. I also want to give him credit too for helping me get a notary bill up there in the committee up there. He spent a lot of time working on that. To his credit, I do want to thank you for that.
Well, I think the world of all three of these people. I think they all know that. They do. Kansas Coalition for Life needs help on site. We need to have some more trained sidewalk counselors. Had a wonderful thing happen here 2 nights ago, Wednesday night, in this very office here, just by happenstance. Pastor Brockman, who had talked to a young lady who was going in for an abortion, talked her out of it. Wednesday night, he met her for the first time with her 10-month-old baby, and it was very nice. I have pictures on a camera somewhere. I think Brian's got my camera back there. I've got pictures on there, and a little bit of video of that meeting, and it was just fabulous. The baby was sleeping at first, and when the baby woke up, all it wanted to do was laugh. Pastor Brockman was saying, what's your name and how are you and everything, and the baby just started laughing and had us all laughing. The baby never cried at all. It was either sleeping or laughing. 2 things that baby does. So I'm so happy it's on this earth with us and not a victim of abortion. So by the way, if you want to feel good about yourself and what you're doing in life and what you're doing with your time, talk to us. If you're retired, you can take a 1-hour shift a week. I bet you can manage that. But just being there to offer help to these moms when they're at their neediest time, and basically it's just handing them a piece of literature. That's mostly what you do. And it can make such a big difference in their life. So if you want to do that, I need more help. We're always looking for more help. We've got about 211 volunteers now. I need about 600, which is what we had during the tiller years. Right now, we just can't seem to get above that 211, 225 area. And we need really just about twice as many as we have. Finally, we have the next KRA meeting is in September. We're trying to get Lieutenant Governor Collier. He's real interested. He almost took this meeting's time slot, but I'm glad the way it worked out. This is a very good, timely topic, and I'm glad it worked out this way. Possibly next month or October, you might see Lieutenant Governor Collier, who by then may be governor of Kansas. So we're moving up in the world, and I'm very proud of it. I had told them we were estimated for Golden Corral that we would have 30 people here. I see we have 28. That's the best we can do, but if you have friends that want to join and can get other people in, I would like to pack the room. Actually, this is about as comfortable as it gets. If it's too crowded, it gets a little bit hard, and the room is too small. But this is wonderful. But if you have friends, tell them about us and invite them to come with you. And with that, I'm ready for an adjournment.
So moved.
So moved. Jim, and seconded. All in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. We're adjourned. Thank you again for being here, everybody.